11 years is a long time. The truth is, it's not such a long time, but in the span of someone's career, especially, I've been a rabbi now for 16 years. Um, 11 years is a good chunk of my identity as a rabbi. Countless moments of personal and professional transformation have been part of my experience as a rabbi of a vibrant community here in Berkeley, California. And to the most important thing I can say in anticipation of a Shabbat where I will be celebrating with friends, already missing them in many ways, looking at the halls and walls that have really defined so much of my life over the course of the last 11 years. I look at seats in the sanctuary, and some of this feeling I'll be sharing during this Shabbat, but I look at the space right in front of where we read Torah, and I see where my friend John Gallinson, when he died, waited for us to bury him. And I look at that space and I miss my friends Leslie Gordon, George Goodall, Leonid Plotkin, countless other people whose lives weren't just names for me. They were eyes and hopes and prayers. And the people whose lives they touched sit around them. I also look at that very same space, and that is where we've had Pretend Shabbat for our preschool for 11 years, since we founded it 11 years ago. I look at that space and I see places where our B'nai Mitzvah have stood, including my own daughter. I look at that space and I see where I stood when I became rabbi of Netivot Shalom and my father blessed me. I look at that space and I see countless friendships and struggles, because that is also where we've had our town halls and our public meetings about items and issues that sometimes were divisive and sometimes unifying. I look at that space and I see the walls that we almost lost when the mortgage was overwhelming for our budget, and where people stepped up and saved their own community. What I want to share is just a small piece of a conversation that my dear friend Rabbi David Paskin and I are going to have publicly tomorrow, right after Kiddush. It's based on some readings, and I'll place a link to these readings in the comment for this video in a moment. It's from some readings by Rabbi Abram Joshua Heschel, and he talks very, very eloquently, as he always did, maybe not linearly, but very eloquently, about something called transitive concern. And that is something that a community really does struggle with. Rabbis certainly do, leaders certainly do, but even the members of a community who don't have a leadership role, the question is, what do we bring with us when we show up to community? We certainly have our own personal narrative. I have my own story. I have my own backstory. Some of it is lived publicly, and some of it is an inner life that I know best, and maybe even I don't know very well. We are always on journeys of deep personal discovery when we live. And when we live in community, those needs and those incredibly personal journeys intersect in ways that are very unpredictable, even to you, even to me. So what is it to be part of a community? So here's what I want to share. In America, sometimes we think of community as a place where we go to get our needs met, and that is certainly true. But I can tell you, just as much as that is true, so too is the experience that I've watched from countless people who find themselves shocked that they walk through the doors of a synagogue in the first place. It is an incredible thing to show up and stretch your comfort level. Why do I go somewhere where I don't speak the language fluently? Why do I go somewhere where the God that is worshipped might not even be familiar to me, or I reject outright? People bring all of those stories. Why do people consider Judaism when that isn't their backstory? Why do people show up when they're struggling with the Judaism that has been their backstory? All of that is alive and well and struggling, and sometimes not well, in the hearts and souls of people who call a community their home. So what I want to share is that Abram Joshua Heschel had some very deep things to say about what it was to be human. So here is some of it. When it comes to the question of transitive concern, it means that the highest goal of a human being, the deepest gift of being a human, which also means the closest to God we can become, is to make a decision not based on my self-interest, but based on yours. And here's one of the ways that Heschel says it. He has many, many ways that he says it throughout his writings. A person entirely unconcerned with their self is dead. A person exclusively concerned with their self is a beast. The mark of distinction from the beast, as well as the index of maturity, is the transdimensionality of a person's concern. These are very Heschel words. The child becomes human not by discovering the environment which includes things and other selves, but by becoming sensitive to the interests of other selves. Human is the one who is concerned with other selves. A human being is a being that can never be self-sufficient, not only by what they must take in, but also by what they must give out. A stone is self-sufficient. A person is self-surpassing, which means at its deepest, to be a human being is to show up for someone else. Well, that's what a rabbi is called to do, but a rabbi is not called to do that uniquely, and this is the message that I hope to impart most clearly tomorrow and throughout my rabbinate, and I really do hope that I've shared this kind of teaching over the years. The deepest calling of a human being, not of a rabbi, not exclusively of a rabbi, is to be there for someone else. So why do you show up for a community? Well, we all have our reasons. Sometimes we show up because we have needs, and the shul provides services. Sometimes it's our children's needs, sometimes it's our partner's needs, sometimes it's because we struggle to have children and don't. Sometimes it's because we struggle because we don't have a partner. And sometimes we just show up because it's familiar. Sometimes we show up because it's not familiar, and that itself is a welcome shift. Sometimes it's a refuge from a world that is shaky, and sometimes this world becomes complacent and you show up to community so that you can shake the world. So one of the challenges I think we need to face is that we sometimes place our expectations of meeting other people's needs on symbolic exemplars. We know that someone else has needs, so we show up to shul because we are that other person who has needs. But the question is, when you show up, do you recognize that you, even if you didn't show up, are called to help someone else? The biggest gift you can do in this world, the most godly thing you can do in this world, is show up for someone else. So what is the message that I hope to share after 11 years as rabbi of Netivot Shalom, after 16 years of being rabbi in the world, and in anticipation of beginning my role as scholar in residence at UJ Federation of New York? Help somebody else. Be kind in this world. Know that the closest to God you can ever become is looking at someone else, knowing that you can do something to help them. It's even deeper if you don't know them. It's even deeper than that if you don't agree with them, if there's something about them that is distasteful to you. To find the humanity in someone else and to do something about it is to love the world in God's name. So there's nothing better than that. There's nothing deeper than that. Please show up. This Shabbat should be very sweet, and I am grateful to the committee that's putting together a very sweet goodbye Shabbat for me. I'm grateful that Rabbi David Paskin, my dear friend, is going to come and share Torah, that my teacher and my intern, almost Rabbi Lisa Rappaport, will be sharing Torah. I'm most privileged that my children will be present with me. And I'm very excited for this next step of my life. Saying goodbye is very hard. As the Muppets say, saying goodbye, why is it sad, makes us remember the good times we've had. So, okay, that's gorgeous and sweet and furry like a Muppet. What I would ask for us is to hold the concern for each other most deeply. Because no matter what step anyone takes in their professional or personal career, it is always the right time to do something for someone else. Shabbat Shalom.